It's a little bit even like these here, okay? Some of these are even more developed. But this is roughly black in because it's pretty much the same size faces. You see what I mean? Okay. And then once I did that, then I would go on to the next person and the next person. And at some point I stopped and I came back to try to develop some of these. Now some of these I would paint over again. You know, when I speak about alla prima painting, it isn't just a one-day painting. Like in the book I showed you by Richard Schmidt. Those are one-day paintings. That's why they look so painterly and rough. But in here, I'm developing the painting, a little like the old masters. So that's why you see more of a full development of the form, like in the old master paintings. And that's what I'm really trying to get at. And there is a aesthetic quality that is lost today, you know, because you don't see it. People don't do it. And even there are variations of realism. Who was it? Oh, the model in the class was showing me how she posed for Pearlstein. You know, he was a painter who was pretty popular, taught at the Queens or Brooklyn University or Brooklyn College, and he would do these realistic paintings, but they were kind of line, and there was a kind of dark and light stylization. It was a little different than the old master realism. See, and I'm trying to get at more of that old master realism because aesthetically, it pleases me. And I think also, and this is important, it communicates an idea. And the communication isn't just a cerebral idea, but it's really a visceral gut impact when you see the reality of forms together. You really feel the emotion more. You know, and that's what I'm trying to get. So when you look at some of the old master paintings, if you can identify with the subject especially, you really get this feeling more. So anyhow, I would go back and work on it some more, and then I'd develop these figures more as I went, and I'd have to make a lot of changes and then paint over. Even if I kept the figure, like she was pretty good from the start, and even if I kept it, I would still often develop it a little more. Over here, her head was too big, so I had to make it smaller because it really didn't fit with the rest of the line of the heads, you know. So these are things you begin to notice after a while, where you have to be sure that things adjust perspective-wise. If it was an abstract painting, I could make the head twice the size. Who cares? You don't need that skill. So this is what I'm trying to show, is that there is a certain skill involved in these things that is getting lost and has gotten lost for a century. And if you look at the realism that's done by the so-called important realists of the 20th century, you see that, where they're becoming a little bit crudely drawn and you know, it's just and just stylized. Now, in going on, after I did the group of figures, I felt back here there was a space. So over here, I resorted to some of my illustration techniques, and I looked through some scrap. And I got pictures of this guy back here and that guy over there. I think this was on some unemployment line, this guy from, you know, some place in the Midwest where he was looking for a job as a lumberman. And this one over here was one of the Depression era pictures. You know, somehow you can tell a little bit by the hat, but it's not all that clear. But I kind of wanted to make a little bit of that link. For the model here, I actually used Esteban, this guy, and I rented a uniform from Abracadabra, where they sell costumes and stuff like that, and put it on. Now, of course, they didn't fit exactly, And it may not be exactly a police or SWAT uniform, but it's pretty close. Because I don't really care about the technical accuracy of that. But as long as it conveys the message. I had to adjust the helmet because the helmet didn't really fit on him. And in the article, you'll see a photograph in there of him with the helmet on. You see, and you'll see how it doesn't really fit. But then in the picture, you make it fit. And then with the dog, I went over to Grand Central Station where I know I've seen some police dogs. They're so relaxed, so it didn't give the feeling that I wanted. You know, I wanted a dog like he's ready for action. And in fact, even though I was trying to take pictures of the dog saw me taking pictures of him, but the cop didn't. If the cop saw me, I'm sure I would have been arrested. You know, so these are some of the chances you take in life. At any rate, I saw a reference photograph of a dog being trained. I think it was in France. So that very dog looked like he was ready to spring, and there was some other action going on. So I used that. But the dog was in the light, in the sunlight. But I wanted them to be in the shade. Because the people representing evil, I wanted to be in the shade. The same thing with the guy here. They're behind the masks and in the shade. It conveys that message. This is a device used by artists over the years, centuries. So I put him in the shade. So of course, to put him in the shade, well, you have to know a little bit about painting and how you could put him in the shade so he looked like the right color, but in the shade. Well, in fact, look at the cop's hand. This is not exactly skin color, but I wanted him to be in the shade. So there were various tones of bluish and blackish tones that enabled me to get that look in the shade so it doesn't jump out of place. But you can tell that's a hand, see, holding the leash. And of course the police barriers, as you may have seen in my book, I've done a number of those over the years, but I also took some photographs of some of the police barriers on the street, and that helped me. You know, but then I put it together pretty much freehand without even referring to it. Sometimes I would make changes like her hand here. Her hand was clutching a bag. I don't have it here. But in some of the earlier lock-ins, her hand was clutching a bag, so it's a different design. But I wanted to have her, I didn't want her hand to be in the same line as the other hands. And so I also wanted a little movement forward. I also felt that if she's got earphones, it kind of goes with maybe some rhythm or something that she's hearing on the phones. So then, you know, I changed that way, and she came and posed with a hand like that. Okay, now there's one other thing I have to confess to. For several reasons, I did use photographs to help me in this. Essentially, I did the painting from life, but I use photographs, and I find in this light, it helps me to get that general feel of the sculpture and the light and shade and volume, you know, so I felt that was important. But one of the other reasons is that at $20 an hour, and I'm repainting people every now and then, it became expensive. And I know that this is not the kind of a painting somebody's going to buy to put in their living room. So why am I doing it? Right? Now, do you do all artwork to sell? I guess you do if you can afford to. But if you can afford to, maybe you can't afford it, maybe like Rockefeller could afford it. So you have to cut back a little bit. So I used photographs to help me in that sense. But the photographs also help me in other ways. For example, there are various folds that always look different whenever the people came back and posed. And if you want the painting to be a little more developed, you had to rely on those changes. on certain material especially, like in here. Or for example, over here, to hold his hand up, you know, and I was having a problem with that hand. You know, it really helps. You still make changes from it for a variety of reasons, but I found that, you know, it really helped me a lot. And but I would say that the use of the light this way and the use of, you know, painting from life is a factor that makes your work look a little three-dimensional. Now, compositionally, and I'm going to end on this because I know you guys are getting tired of hearing me. Compositionally, I feel there is a flow in the way these figures are grouped together. The thrust of the police barrier, see, all that plays a role, you know, in conveying the message. Because the message is pictorially, it isn't just, you know, a political illustration or a social point of view. You know, the message, the concept, and the art is intertwined. It is not, you know, separate. You know, it's like you can't separate Shakespeare's ideas from his writing or from the speaking of the lines. You know, it's all intertwined. Are you okay?
Yes.
Because you're holding it. Okay. Anyhow, I'm a little bit talked out, and I would talk about some other things, but I just want to know, do you have any questions, anybody? Oh, you have a question.
How do you decide where to put the colors? You know, there might be swim. There's a lot. It's sort of like bright spots of color. You do that on purpose?
Now, which colors are you talking about, for
Like
example?
the green, the red, the yellow, and the light blue.
You mean over here, the color of skin? Or
No,
the
the-
color over here?
The white colors.
Okay.
The headphones, for example.
The headphones, the blue shirt, the yellow
All right,
shirt, the
I'm
red.
sorry. The phones were that color.
Oh, they were?
It was that color. A lot of the reality is usually good as you see it.
Yeah.
This was that color. This was pretty much that color. I might have changed things occasionally a little bit, you know, as it develops. I'll tell the models you wear something a little different. For example, see here I changed the costume totally. Here she came, like she, you know, normally is walking in the streets, more comfortable. But somehow I wanted this, and here is where I see the people. Now maybe I'm stereotyping a little bit. I don't intend to. Maybe I do. I saw them as a Hispanic couple. They're from Mexico. They are different than the other people here. Their ethnic background is different. I think that there is a certain beauty in those differences. And I felt that her in a dress here would give it a little of that flair, that ethnic flair, that feminine flair, because after all, she's a wife consulting her husband. Now, you don't know if it's a wife or a husband, of course, but she is, you know, sort of comforting him, rather. So I wanted to change that, you see. I also like the way her arm comes out of the dress here, and her hand comes around the arm. I mean, these are things that you kind of choreograph as you go. You know, and of course, once she came with that dress and I saw it, of course, I liked it. Now, he happened to come. I said, come as if you're looking for a job. And he's serious. You know, when he poses, I don't know if you've ever posed, you guys have never painted him. When he poses, he's always got this, you know, proud look, like he's very determined. When he's not posing, he's sort of joking around and acting silly. You know. But when he's posing, he's got that serious look. And somehow, you know, here he is, you know, this, you know, Aztec prince posing like that, you know, with pride. And I wanted to get that pride. And he came with a tie, you know, and that and a vest. So I liked the fact that he had that on. And I found that when I got this guy to pose, he seemed, his demeanor seemed so cool. by comparison to him. And yet, you know, the idea is that they're both in need. But it's a difference of personalities entering into a picture. And to me, you know, that makes it a group of individuals, not where everybody's like a soldier trying to be the same. Now even Pat here, you know, the way he's standing there, unassuming, that's his nature, right? I mean, you saw him in class, right? And there's something very, you know, beautiful and serene about the guy, you know, so humble. And I kind of like that. I don't know if you know her, but she tends to be a little more animated when you see her personality. You ever been her? Yeah. And you can see that, you know, she's a little more intense. And her nature came out here. So I asked her to pose if you're looking for a job, you know, maybe as if you're looking for a position or whatever. So I said, dress a little formally. So she came in the dress and all that. It looked kind of sexy, you know. But anyhow, she's, you know, and then I'm saying, well, make believe, you know, you're having a conversation. So just hold your hand a certain way. And she takes the pose because she's used to posing. So there's a certain swing. You don't see the full pose here. See, on these here, you see a little more because you see over here, like her hip is out, you know. You see the hip is out and her hand is holding a bag or something. I don't know what it is. But anyhow, there was a little bit of that, you see. So I got that aspect into it, you know. So she's got that sort of pizzazz, and looks like she's animated and telling him something, maybe telling him off or whatever, you know. Like maybe saying, you're not doing this right or something like that. There's something very human about that. Now, over here, this one, Betty, she's a wonderful model and, you know, very streetwise, you know, very articulate. But she doesn't talk much unless you know, talk to her and all that. But she has this wise, street-like feel. At least to me, it seemed that way. And I kind of like that. So I said to her, make believe you're looking at the cop on the other side. You know? And I gave her my Velasquez book to hold. So it had a little more variation in there. She brought a bag here, which I kind of liked. And I borrowed it so that I could paint it even when she wasn't around. Now, there were areas that I had to change every now and then. See, here I got a nice transparency in the shade, you know, as opposed to the light. See, over here also, I like the form that I got in his face. But over here, this was quite dark, and I had to lighten it to get a little more transparency. I mean, I didn't want it to look as bad as a Caravaggio. Now, that's a bad joke. Caravaggio's a great artist, and I'm influenced by him. But since I saw that exhibition in the Hartford Athenaeum, and I saw Caravaggio's work, and then I saw some of the other people's work, especially this one guy I mentioned in class, Honthorst, a Dutch painter. And he had transparency in the shade. I like that. You know, but you still see strong light in the shade. So you asked a question about the colors I decided to use. See, now his shirt was kind of pink. Yeah. And the denim here was pretty much, in fact, that, you know, I didn't even use any photo reference on it. It was all there. I got it right away. See, on her I did a few changes, but she brought different clothing. See, in areas like this, you have to get transparency. You see how it's in the shade? But you want to look into the shade to see what's there, as long as it doesn't distract. Over here it is kind of dark and opaque, but I'm not good enough to really get that more transparent. Maybe I'll know more in about 10 years and I'll be able to do that. Do you have any other questions? There's a lot more you can say about these things.
How long did you take to finish this painting?
This was almost a year. Yeah, because I was on it, and then I left it a little bit, and then I came back to it, and then there was a time I even put it on Facebook, because I wanted to write, look, this is what I'm doing, it's not finished. And people thought I was crazy, because you might fall on your face. You might not succeed. So, and I did. I fell on my face. So I said, I'm having trouble, which is understandable. Now maybe some people thought I'm putting them on to let them know that, hey, look, every artist has trouble. So I wrote down, that, I'm having, some difficulty, but, I've got to work it out. Or maybe I had it and I came back and said something. And then some people started giving me suggestions what to do. And other people, and some people, even at the very beginning, were saying when I just had the block in, oh, that's good, just the way it is, don't work on it anymore. You get all kinds of reactions. But that's why it took so long. There were times when I stopped for a few weeks and then came back to it.
Do you ever work on more than one painting at once?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, always. Yeah. Sure. During that time, I'm not only on this. Yeah. With all the paintings I'm doing, I do it that way. With the illustrations, those wraparounds you saw, the big ones, there was a time I was doing 4 a month.
Wow.
They were loading me up with work because they liked what I was doing. So, and, how can you say no to the money? At that time, they were paying me $6,000 a cover.
Wow.
So, it added up, Now my stepson gets more because he gets royalties on children's books. But he didn't get royalties for these things. These were the covers, When I do the insides, I get royalties.
Did you paint from life at all when you were doing illustration?
I did, but not as much as I should have. I painted less and less. And the work I did started to get a little flat. Now here's an example. This is a painting. This is a painting I did from a photograph. I told you about this. Now here I felt to a degree I was getting a little flat. You see, as much as I try not to, when you look at these and you look at this, you see the difference. There is a depth in that. In this, it does fall a little flat. Yet, I feel this is one of my more successful paintings, even though others may have more contrast. Like, for example, the one on the end there, at a hot dog stand, it's got a lot of contrast and variation. But I feel it doesn't quite have the flow of form like this has. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Now, there's something also in doing these, I did it like I did my illustration. I would take a photograph, and then I would project. And I would get the images. I even Dolly, he was in the photograph. And then I would just paint it like I saw it. Once I traced the stuff, then I would just paint it like I'm doing now. And then getting into finer brushes, not like in class. I was getting into some sables and do little details. But I had to get back into the bigger brushes to keep it a little more honest. Otherwise, it gets a little too linear. So I just wanted to show you that because, I'm dealing with the use of the photograph, and for a whole lot of reasons, I don't get the kind of depth that I want to get. And you see, what I'm dealing with is a question of three-dimensional design. Usually in painting, we talk about a two-dimensional work of art, two-dimensional design, because it's on a flat surface. But I'm interested in that too, because the organization, the way it relates to the size of the picture, how the figures are in that two-dimensional space, that's important. But there is also the design of the space, of the depth. And this is a factor. And this is one thing I'm getting at. I'll tell you though, frankly, I've had a lot of problems when I'm doing things from life to deal with images that go really far into space. You know, when you want to get into, let's say you do people, let's say you're doing a field, people, and then there's hills going back and horizons. It's hard to get that sense of depth. You know, it looks artificial. Some of the old masters during the Renaissance tried doing that. You know, you may have seen some of the early perspective drawings, and wow, the stuff looked mechanical. It wasn't until the more Baroque period, you know, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, and so on, when they're doing the work more empirically. You know, you're observing, so you're seeing the relationships of things in front of you. You know, the other way, it's sort of calculating it scientifically. I don't know, are you guys listened out? Well, I'm talked out, you listened out? So anyhow, listen, that coffee is probably getting cold. Is that coffee you got there? Oh, we better have some, and then we'll finish our talk, you know, on a more personal. Why don't you go and have some? Do you have cups and everything? Yeah?